Welcome to another episode of the Inside in Tennis podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Michals. We're back again for another episode, available on the Believe Network and wherever you get your shows, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals. Our first set of clay tournaments in the books. Excited to get on this road to Roland Garros. A lot to get into, including the Houston matches that you heard this man call. He's a friend of the program, working at Tennis Channel this past week. NCAA champion Bradley Klahn back again. Bradley, always good to talk some tennis with you, and excited to do it as clay season ramps up.
Mitch, always a pleasure. Thanks again for having me on. Looking forward to breaking down the start of the clay court season.
Yeah, was it always just kind of a new section of the season for you? Because I think we've discussed this a little bit before. Whether you had a good first quarter or more of the season, really first third of the season for a lot of players, or whether you struggled, it does feel like tennis has that unique option and luxury that players have to where, okay, let's just move on to something else. What's done is done. A whole new season, a whole new stretch of the season is starting.
Yeah, it's really these changes. You take a look at Miami to the clay, and then you have the grass court season. That's a quick shift, but then you go grass to hard. Like they're really, we talk about how long the season is and how it can really cluster together, but there are these moments in time throughout the year that offer natural resets. And I think that transition from the Indian Wells Miami Sunshine Double, the challengers on the hard court for the players outside the top 100, to now shift to the clay courts. And really, it's a mindset shift. You'll see some guys take longer breaks, get a little extra training in. You'll see some of the Americans immediately starting Houston, others getting right into Monte Carlo, but it does provide that reset.
Yeah, I always thought, looking at Houston, which we can start with, it's good that there's the U.S. men's clay tournament. We have red clay in Houston. It's a big event. It's got a nice country club feel. But I did think it was interesting. Like, we know the Americans are there. The amount of Argentines, not just in the finals, but it felt like almost like a country versus country battle. America has held up their end of the deal in this tournament for a long time, but seeing all the Argentines do well was pretty cool also.
It certainly felt like an Argentina versus United States Davis Cup battle, didn't it? You
Yeah.
just look up and down the draw. You had 14 of the 28 players in the draw on the singles side were from the U.S., and that's no surprise. The Americans, we love to stay close to home. Houston is an incredible event. It's first class. The crowd support from the members of the club and just the tournament staff led by Bronwyn, it's top notch. And it was certainly a tournament for me, and I know a lot of the Americans that always have it circled on the calendar.
Hmm.
Even I know I went there many times struggling, had barely had any days on the clay, but it was one of those events you just didn't want to miss. And good opportunity to get on the clay. Look, it's not the same as the red clay in Europe, right?
Hmm.
It's I always found it more. It's a hard true that's red, and it plays
Yeah.
in between the green hard true clay that you see a lot in the States, and also the red clay over in Europe. But it's an awesome opportunity. It's a great chance for the Americans to go in
Yeah.
there and get reps, and also not have to spend 3 months over in Europe.
Yeah, and that's the last point is a big one, right? It's why, unfortunately, Monte Carlo doesn't seem to have a lot of Americans. It's like the one that kind of you might take off before you have to make that commitment. I also thought, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but whether it's like a hard true or just not quite as, clay-like, so to speak, as what we're going to see in Europe, it's kind of a good transition period from going to the hard court. You can start with that and ease your way into it because the movement, even if you're world class and you're used to it, which unfortunately a lot of people in this region of the world aren't, rather, it's good to have some reps before you dive into it because you have to get used to just moving in a whole new way.
Definitely. You want to talk about the stress on like the adductors, for example. You take a look at body parts and where injuries are going to occur. We talk a lot about hard courts and say the grittiness of Indian Wells, and you actually see a lot of like low back and hip issues there for you to go in and see the
Mhm.
trainers and get the laundry list. And then you get on the clay, and now all of a sudden you're really sliding out. You don't have as much stability under your feet. You start to worry about adductor injuries, other
Mhm.
hip injuries, just less stability. And so, to your point, an opportunity to get some reps. Um, Depending on how well you've done in Miami, you either have a week block, maybe you have
Yeah.
a 3-day block. Um, like a guy like Tommy Paul, who made a good run in Miami and has to turn around pretty quickly. I think he played his first round match exactly a week after Miami, and you
Hmm.
factor in some downtime after a long sunshine double. It can be a quick turnaround.
Certainly can be. But let's get into the tournament. Last year it was, as we've discussed before, all 8 quarterfinalists were American. This year, a lot of Argentinians. It was won by an American again. It was won by Tommy Paul. In one of the more remarkable performances I've seen this year, Bradley, and I want to take it back to Miami because the week that Tommy Paul had, really the 2 weeks that he had in that time period, losing to Arthur Fils, a match that he was famously up 6-2 in that tiebreak, a brutal loss if ever there was one, to rebound the way he did, to get over some demons in the semifinal match against Tiafoe, where it took him 4 match points to win. You know, those thoughts were creeping back in his head. And to dig deep and save championship points against Berchuga in the final, it was special. And I just kept thinking it takes a special type of athlete to overcome those demons so quickly. You hear about losses snowballing and really just ravaging a season, unfortunately. He was able to turn the page, Bradley, and he's the Houston champ. So props and full marks to Tommy Paul and the team.
Yeah, it was just an incredible effort from Tommy and his team. We talked about that Miami quarterfinal. I know we mentioned a lot on air when I called his opening round match in Houston. So for him, it would have been his second round against a really good young talent from Paraguay and Vallejo. And you talk about the 6-2 lead in Miami, and he didn't play the points poorly, right? And I think if you're starting there, something you can hang your hat on is like, hey, I went for it. Sure. Was the execution there? Not always. Did Feast come up with some incredible shots to get back in that tiebreak? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you have an opponent on the side of the net that also gets to dictate how the match is won and lost.
Right.
And for Tommy, it's not an easy pill to swallow. You know, with the opportunity, if you're starting to look ahead in the draw, you know that you have Lehechka in the semifinals, who is
Hmm.
a incredible player and one of the cleanest ball strikers. But when you're staring down either Carlos Alcaraz in the semi to make a Masters 1000
Yeah.
or you're Lehechka, you take your chances with Lehechka. And so I think, kind of broadly speaking, Tommy has just generally done a phenomenal job of becoming such a professional in all aspects of the game. And
Yeah.
he's got a great team around him in Brad Stein and Hugo Armando on the coaching staff. The fitness has been there with Franco Herrero. He really understands how to take care of himself. And he's also a guy that knows when to step back and recharge. And, he loves his
Go
fishing.
fishing. Yeah.
He loves his tennis, and
Yeah.
it's his
Yeah.
outlet. And every athlete needs an
Mhm.
outlet. And you see the pictures of him fishing in Houston
Yeah.
and just finding that opportunity to reset. I
Yeah.
think it allows him to bounce back quickly because let's face it, that's a painful loss. It's not the first or it's not the last painful loss in his career, and you can't let those define you. And I thought he did an excellent job. He was sluggish in the first round, his first
Mhm.
match on the clay. It certainly looked like a first match on the clay in Houston. Vallejo deserved a lot of credit for pushing him,
Right.
but Tommy's playing a guy outside 100 at the time, and
Hmm.
that's a match that you expect Tommy to cruise through, and it wasn't the case. The guy took it to Tommy. He defended well, but I think that was also a match that really established, or just reiterated how tough Tommy has become mentally,
Yeah.
battling himself. I can't remember the exact number of breaks, but I think there was 5 breaks to serve in that
Yeah.
final set alone. And even you think he's pulling away in the second set, and he's up 4-0, and next thing you know, it's 4-3. And
For
so
sure.
I think that really set the tone of resiliency through the rest of the tournament. And
Uh-huh.
to get through Frances, who's won here in Houston before. Frances was going for his fourth straight final in Houston,
Crazy.
and for Tommy to battle that and have match points and not get it and finally come through, and then to save match points in the final and ultimately win it. Look, very rarely titles are won with a dominant performance in every match throughout the event. And it's the ability to pull out matches
For
that
sure.
maybe you shouldn't have won, or pull out matches when you're not your best, that
Mhm.
ultimately will define your career at the end of the day. And Tommy really did that and stepped up.
Yeah, I think the crowd was obviously on his side. It was helpful to have them kind of will him on. He played some smart points when he was down. I think too, and this is the best part about sports for me. I think that there is a connectivity to all these results. Like I don't play the what if game. I think a loss can lead to a win. I think a win sometimes maybe you don't win that next match if you win before. You kind of need that the phrase like that dirt or that dirt underneath your fingernails to kind of like harden you a little bit. And I think that
Yeah,
ultimately helped him.
yeah. We always had the saying, "Be where your feet are," and it
Yeah,
sounds so cliche and simple, but ultimately you are what you are. You're tennis. The beauty of tennis, and you and I talk about it a lot on here, is we like to break down the winners, but ultimately there's a tournament the following week, and when you win on Sunday, the next week starts on Monday, and if you're in the draw, you're just one of
right.
28, 32, 64, however big the draw is,
Mhm.
vying for another championship, and uh, you can lose, you can win and be at the peak on a Sunday, and you can be out of the next tournament on a Tuesday morning and wonder what happened, and not nothing's changed in the span of 48 hours. You ride the roller coaster.
It's good to see him and the team jump in the pool collectively. Might have been in some beverages beforehand, but they made a nice little jump into the pool as per tradition, which was good to see. I do think the last thing on Tommy, I think his game on clay might be the best version of him. He's gotten so well at all surfaces, but Bradley, do you see what he can do in these specific areas where his game on clay? We know the athleticism. He was running down balls in the final, even when he was stumbling, he was still able to get there. And we know about the aggressive forehand, but what specifically makes him special on clay?
It's fun. Like he's obviously had success from winning
Yeah.
juniors at Roland
Hmm.
Garros, and he's a guy whose game I feel like translates to all surfaces. Quite candidly, I think he actually could have his best results on grass, because I think
Mm.
the variety that he possesses, and he's one of the better volleyers on tour on the single side. His ability to move forward and stay calm under pressure up inside the service line and dig out tough volleys and really expose guys in that regard, I think is top. It's second to none right now on tour.
Yeah.
And so I think when you combine that and you take him back on the clay, he has a lot of ways he can hurt you. He has the forehand, he has the movement, he can mix up the slice. Just watching him make adjustments with how he game plans, whether he's trying to pin a
Right.
guy in the backhand corner, or actually, I guess it would have been the forehand corner like Vallejo early on, and just making in match adjustments. I think a lot of that comes down to his trust in Brad Stein as well, and the relationship that they've had over the past. I believe they've been together 6 years, or going on 7 years. So I think a lot of that comes down to the trust that they have in each other, and just Brad's ability
Hmm.
to continue adding pieces to his game.
Yeah. Well, another American champion. It's been won by Ben Shelton, Tiafoe, Brooksby. We've discussed some of their names, but another American to add to the list. For the finalists, I just want to mention Roman Burchuga, who a lot of people didn't know much about, has a breakthrough run, really dynamic game. He was mixing in variety as well. And he's another, we talked about his dad, right, who was on the World Cup team, scored the game winning goal for Argentina in 1986. But this is somebody that is one of 10 Argentines now in the top 100. So they are doing something right in terms of building a deep talent pool that can succeed. In Berchuga, I hope he can take it forward and keep progressing up the levels of the tour.
Yeah, look, I think when you talk about Americans coming and playing Houston, I think the Argentines it's a great opportunity as well, because you think of where they have to travel to if they want to go home and reset after Miami. Houston's a much more appealing destination than flying all the way to Europe and getting some opportunity. And let's face it, you take a look at the draw and you see half the draw is filled with Americans. You're licking your chops with an opportunity to 250 to take advantage of some guys that maybe aren't on their most favored surface. So you certainly saw that in Berrechuga. Tarante, I was super impressed with him calling a couple of his early round matches and knocking out Shelton before it looked like he just ran out of gas and really got waxed by Berrechuga. But I think you look at across the board with Cerundolo and Echeverry leading the charge, and now you've got this young talent pool that's really trying to push forward as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? As I was looking up info on him, he had a match, his Brazil Challenger that he won last year. It's like the second longest. It was all tie breaks. So maybe that's the secret to him is just endurance. He can win a 3-set tiebreaker in Brazil. God knows it was probably sweltering there. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes for them. One final note on Houston, though, Bradley, and I was just looking at it. You know, the Americans had a mixed bag. Obviously, the champion was Paul. Tiafoe loses a tough one in the semis, but he's looked a lot better. He did have early losses for Lerner, for Ben Shelton, who hasn't really found his groove, Michelsen as well. Thoughts on the Americans as a whole outside of Paul, the rest of the bunch?
Yeah, like I think maybe separate Paul and Tiafoe, because Frances ran into Tommy in the semis. I do think Frances has started to turn the corner, making the final in Acapulco, bringing on a new team. He really seems committed, and just hearing him speak, trying to really, I guess, turn a new leaf and understand where his goals are. And it's always refreshing when you hear an athlete just take accountability and not be satisfied with where they are. And I give Frances a lot of credit for that, because it's not easy to do. And I think he's slowly starting to see those rewards. So those two aside, I think Ben had such a strong start to the year. He did not look healthy in Indian Wells and Miami. He looked sick. He was laboring. He did not have his normal energy.
No.
And, he's a guy that plays with a lot of passion and fire, and it brings the crowd into it, but it also lifts him up to play his best tennis. And I didn't see that in Indian Wells in Miami. And in seeing him in Houston, it seemed like a guy who was just trying to get healthy again, to continue finding it. He's always going to have the serve to keep him in matches, but just looked a little bit out of sorts and ran into a guy in Durante who lost 5 games in his first 2 matches and was really cleaning up on the Americans. But on the positive note for Ben, him staying and winning doubles with his buddy and former Florida teammate, I think says so much about his character and his talent level just across singles and doubles. But most importantly, like the willingness to stick it out. Look, you're the 1 seed, you go out in the quarters. It's easy to mail it in. And he hung around, played a great doubles tournament, got a title. And there's a lot of confidence that can come with wins, whether it's the singles court or the doubles court, that I think can pay off, lead into a big clay court season for him. He has the game to play on clay, the serve, the kick serve that can jump out of the gym, the forehand that can get up on the guy's backhands. That plays on any surface, and I think that's always going to make him a threat.
He played tough against Alcaraz and RG. I know it was 4 sets, and he took the third, but he has some real ability there. So I'm with you. It was great to see. We don't need to list the examples of times we've seen maybe a player mail it in after losing in singles and doubles, but that does unfortunately happen. And I think the young guys, I think they're just kind of figuring it out on clay. Lerner said as much that, this is a whole new experience for him.
Yeah, you're spot on there. It's Lerner still learning how to play on the clay. Last year in Houston, I remember I called his match against Michelsen, and it was Lerner's first tour level match on the clay. Wow. And it showed. And it takes time especially when you're from Southern California and you grow up on outdoor hard year round and you don't really play on the clay, to then go and try and understand the footing, the sliding, when to slide, when not to slide, just feeling the slippery clay under your feet. I think we've seen it with Michelsen. He, to me, feels a little bit further ahead, but he's also had a full two clay court seasons. In his
Hmm.
first year, he committed to playing all 9 weeks on the clay. Every Masters event. He played the 175 Challenger in between, the second week of the Masters. And so for me, he is learning, he's continuing to improve, but
Right.
it's still not quite up to the ability. And I think for Michelsen, you run into a guy like Poprin who has not had a good year, but has had some success on clay. And I think Poprin finally unlocked a little bit by
Hmm.
coming through that match against Kipson in the first round because,
Yeah.
quite frankly, Poprin did not look up to himself in the first set. And I give him a lot of credit as well because he stuck with it. He continued to find ways to keep himself in the second set. And
Right.
we talk about Tommy losing in the quarters of Miami and that heartbreaker and quickly turning it around and
Hmm.
winning here. Kind of similar for Poprin. You
Yeah.
get through a match and like all it takes is one match to get yourself going a little bit, and then he kind of cruised through Mickelson outside of that second set. And so I think for the young Americans, it's just look, it's more time on the clay.
Hmm.
It's learning where their strengths and weaknesses match up on
Hmm.
the dirt and how it differs, and then how do you combat that against the opponent on that day?
We'll see what happens for the entire generation of Americans competing in here. But we got more with Bradley Klahn here on the Inside In Tennis podcast, talking the start of clay court season. Houston in the rear view, as is Charleston, won for the second straight year by Jessica Pegula, who wins at the scenic route. She really becomes the Iron Woman of this tour at this point, Bradley, because other than the final match, it was all hard fought 3-set wins. I think that almost makes, like we were talking about Tommy Paul becoming a professional. Jessica Pegula has been a professional for as long as she's pretty much been on tour. How she handles herself, how she handles the challenge, and that special thing we were talking about, right? Winning when it's not your best day. She fights, and that was the lasting takeaway I have from Pegula is that when she's on the tennis court, whatever the setting is, she's going to fight.
Absolutely. She is a competitor. She's always discussing and finding ways to make improvements in her game. It's been a fantastic year for her. I think, especially on clay courts, she's so good when the ball is right in her pocket, and you see her success on the fast hard courts as well. But back to back titles in Charleston, doing it the gritty way, coming from a set down, grinding out tough three setters from the get go, right? That opening match down a set. I think for her, it's never easy coming into a tournament as a top seed and the defending champ, and feeling a little bit of the pressure and coming back and defending a title, but just a tremendous effort from her, and you know doing all the work in the beginning and then being able to steamroll in the finals and lift that trophy for a second time.
It's still insane. I had Knowles on the show last week, her coach, Mark Knowles. I can't believe how good her serve is now. It's just kind of crazy that everything's clicked, but maybe that's, part of the beauty of tennis is that you never know what's going to be the tipping point to get something special to unlock, but it's happened. And, I think I was looking for comparisons, Bradley, to what she does. And, she's at this like sweet spot of her career where she's older, but not past her prime, playing her best, has been aging very well for a tennis player, especially. But she's at this intersection where, luckily too, like her body hasn't been, beaten down by injuries. So she's able to kind of use her mind to the best of her ability and still have a lot of her physical gifts, which is a blessing. But it's also just really special to be in this pocket in time. And again, a testament to her professionalism.
Definitely. Look, it's a lot of hard work behind the scenes to ensure that you're available week in, week out. She has been, full credit to her and her team for allowing herself to just be able to play consistently, which then allows you to go out and make those adjustments, right? And see what the top players are giving you on certain days and continue to put yourself deep into tournaments. And with that, more and more confidence brews. And then you just start to see, you saw her breakthrough at the slams really and getting through the quarterfinals a couple of years ago and then making the US Open final. And now you feel like she's a player that's going to be on the final weekend every weekend.
And that's the big thing, because we know how good the top two players are, and she's been open. It's tough to beat them. Rybakina right now, Sabalenka as well, that they're at the top. But in a sport that has 4 majors a year, and you keep giving yourself a chance, I mean, you got to think that it can very likely happen for her because of how consistent she is, which is saying it's going to take something special to beat those two players for sure. But it's giving herself a chance, as you said, and staying consistent. She's going to have more cracks at it.
Definitely. You put yourself in position enough and breaks start to fall your way, right? Maybe you only have to go through one of Sabalenka or Rybakina. Maybe you catch someone on off day. Or she's still been able to play them close, right? Let's not say that.
Yeah.
Yes, Sabalenka and Rybakina have been the best 2 players, but it's not like they're light years ahead. It's not like the difference we're seeing in Sinner and Alcaraz on the men's side and how far apart they are, especially at the slams. Like, she is right there. She's knocking on the door. If she continues to put herself in position, that's really all you can do. And you go in with confidence, knowing that you have beaten these players before, and you just you have to come up with the goods on one day.
Yeah.
And that's
just
the beauty of the slams.
Just 1-2 week run, which she's capable of doing. Special. Yeah. She's almost like a quarterback, like a veteran quarterback out there that you can't really fool her. She can just process everything. It's kind of fun to watch her brain work. Well, it was not Madison Keys in the final. We were looking at maybe that would be it, but Starodubtseva, the Ukrainian, really special story. Old Dominion grad, taught at a country club before getting her pro career going. Still relatively young, given all the miles that she had to travel to get to this spot, but thoroughly beating Keys and getting to this final run, ran into Pegula. But this is a player that possesses some weapons, and like we've been saying in the past of players that burst onto the scene, you look at signs. Well, there are signs here that she could be a force to keep climbing up the rankings.
Yeah, you laid it out perfectly. Just an incredible story. Not even coming from a powerhouse traditional college tennis program, but shout out college tennis, continuing to develop players and provide these opportunities in a pathway. I think it's, you had the Vashro story of last year breaking through in Shanghai. This is an incredible story of resiliency. And I think what makes tennis so special is just the opportunity and the different pathways that it takes. You have the stars that come through, and they're going to be stars at 17, 18, 19. The journey for her from Ukraine, teaching lessons, trying to piece together enough money to give herself a chance on tour. And look, this is a life-changing run. Let's say it. It's a final of a 500, knocking off some incredible players. The cherry on top, running through Madison Keys in straight sets in the semifinal and making a final of a 500. Yes, she ran up against the top seed in Pegula, but it's a week that it can change, without being, it can change a career. And
it can.
Be able to use that confidence and continue on, not just the ranking and the money, that can be life-changing as well, but just the belief that you've been in the final, you belong, you've knocked off these players. Now it doesn't feel as daunting when you go out in a Madrid or Rome, you show up at Roland Garros. You start to believe that this is where you're meant to be, and these opponents are beatable.
Up to 53 in the world. So we're knocking on the door of top 50, top 40, seeds at slams. It's all ahead of her. So exciting to see. Another successful Charleston run. We had other tournaments this week. These 5,500 weeks are kind of cool because you're all around the globe. You're seeing, different storylines. And in Marrakech, you had 2 different storylines of 2 different players at different points of their career. It was an older player versus a younger player, one of the biggest age gaps in the final. The younger player took it. First talking about him, Rafael Jodar gets his first title. The Spaniard, still a teenager. Bradley, a lot of hype on this kid. You see this match, you see this run, you understand why. We've heard a lot about him. We saw him in the next gen finals, a lot of us for the first time. Jodar looks like he's a player and he's here to stay.
Yeah, it's funny to think that he could have been a sophomore at UVA, and he's a player. Truthfully, I haven't seen much of, but obviously I've heard so much about him. For him to break through and win an ATP title right away, and really just making the decision at the end of last season to not go back to school.
Where he wasn't playing one, by the way, which is the other thing, too. He wasn't the top singles player in the lineup when he made that decision.
It's wild. I think college tennis there's so many stories. Tennis Sangren, two-time Australian Open quarterfinalist, was playing number 4 at Tennessee. You've got, Vassaro. Ben Shelton was playing 5 at Florida his freshman year. So, it's clear that the lineup in college is not indicative of where they're going to end up on tour, but it's been a meteoric rise for him. Just his ability to look the part as a professional and really seem mature beyond his years and be able to hold up and really run through the final. You talk about a guy on the other side of the net, Marco Trungelliti, who was a guy I played in the qualifying of the US Open my first year on tour.
Oh.
And he's about my age and was a guy that I've known and followed throughout the years and just really seemed like I hate using the term journeyman, but just a guy who had been hovering between 100 and really 120 and 200 and was battling away and just kept going. And, you had a lot of the mental challenges for him with some of the match fixing where he was actually a whistleblower and wasn't able to go back to Argentina and was receiving some pretty nasty messages, but has always been a guy of tremendous integrity and a very friendly face in the locker room. And to see him not just break into the top 100 for the first time at 36, but make a tour final in the same week that he did, I really want to make sure that I give him his proper due, because it's two incredible storylines, right? You got the young guy breaking out on the scene who looks like he's going to be a star in the making for a while.
Yeah.
19, he's going to be around at the top of the game for a long time if he's able to stay healthy. And then on the other side of the net, you have a guy who's been going at it for almost 20 years and finally made reached a childhood goal in playing Davis Cup for Argentina, and now he breaks into the top 100. And again, it's another example of how special this sport is at the highest levels and how there are so many different paths.
36 years old, becomes the oldest man to make his debut in an ATP final, and in the open era, and the second behind Torben Ulrich, the father of the Metallica drummer, to make his top 100 debut. So, age just a number there. Great testament to perseverance. And as you mentioned, he beat some great players. He beat Darderi. He beat Mute en route to this final. So, love to see it. Love the fact that, similar to what we were talking about with Starodubtseva, like you're going to have doors opened because of this run, main draw slam. So, it's just really cool. And it shows you, again, what you said, the sport can offer up so much cool things and so many storylines. As we move on here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, Bradley Klahn joining us for some start of clay court season, some storylines, some highlights and whatnot. And I do want to shout out as well before I forget, Navone wins his first title in Bucharest, and Maria Buskova in Bogota win titles. That's, I believe, her third. So we got more champions to talk to, give their proper due. Great to see those two players win. But it wasn't all good news all week. We had coaching drama across the board, some good, some bad. And just wanted to get your perspective on one or two in particular. Iga Swiatek is going to be working with Francisco Roig right now, who I guess unceremoniously would be one way to put it, but decided he was no longer going to be working with Giovanni MPetshi Perricard. Bradley, I know it's a pretty quick moving business, and it is a business. It's not personal in a lot of ways, but the fact that by all accounts he let the agent know and not the player, does that sit right with you as a former player?
No. It seems that's the short answer. It seems that it's handled that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he's the only one. I would say it does seem like the agents are involved both on the hiring and the firing of a lot of decision makings.
Mm-hmm.
Those conversations are never easy. There are always going to be feelings that are hurt. Even if it is a business, you spend oftentimes you spend more time with your coach, your player, your physio, your team than you do your family. And it can feel very much like a family in a way that might be different than a team sport because that is your team, right? And
Yeah.
so it can be challenging and those lines can be blurred and it's never easy, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important to be able to have those conversations and face the tough moments. And I'm a big believer that does come back around at some point. And look, the tennis world is small. You see a lot of the same faces, whether you're still working with the coach or you guys have parted ways, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
amicably or whether there's a little
Yeah.
bit of tension. The odds are high that you're going to run into
Right.
the person again, and so it's in everyone's best interest to, while respecting that it's a business, do it in as professional a manner as possible. But again, that's
Mm-hmm.
we. I don't know. It's hard without knowing actually the
Right.
facts of the case. You can't make a. You certainly don't want to make a judgment on any one
Right.
person and how they handle it. I think it's just a
Mm-hmm.
broader
Yeah.
conversation of just making sure that the conversations are
Yeah.
held with the player and the coach, and if the agent needs to be brought on and help mediate or just handle
Yeah.
an exit strategy or negotiation. But it always feels better when it comes face to face.
Yeah, it's MPetshi Perricard's account. I'm going to take him at his word for what happened. Again, that's what he says went down. It is a business. Sometimes you're going to have to move on to the job as a coach because, okay, we don't know how long this is going to last. They can get fired really quickly. I understand all that, but just pick up the phone. I think it's easy to just have a call. Look, sorry, this is how it's going to go down. As you say, those tough conversations, face the music a little bit. I think it's good for everyone, especially that dreaded karma word. But as it stands, don't know Roig personally, but I know that working at the Nadal Academy, having Rafa involved with Iga, this could be what the doctor ordered for Swiatek, given the fact that it sounded by her own account that this is a bigger mental challenge than anything else. She knows she can play. She's going to the clay where she's cleaned up and built a Hall of Fame career almost exclusively just with her domination on that court. This is an interesting relationship. Rafa's involvement, Roig as the top coach on her team. All the ingredients are there. I think it should work. But again, it's going to be that mental block, right? Overcoming some fears and some trepidations that she's had. But if you were looking for a dream team led by the greatest clay court player of all time, I think it's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to finish that story, we also only have one side of the story with Pesci
Yeah,
Perricard, right? So we don't know
for
the
sure.
other side. Like I said, it's I always find that the truth lies somewhere in the middle of what
Yeah,
two people are
yeah.
saying. And who can blame Francisco Roig for having the opportunity when you get the call from a Grand Slam champ and a tremendous one at that in Iga Swiatek. Look, we know players move on from coaches, and
Hmm.
there's often not a lot of stability. And I do believe that coaches have the right to take an opportunity to further their career if it
Yeah.
fits. And I think there is a massive opportunity ahead for this pairing to really help
Oh, yeah.
get Iga back on the right track. The talent I would say the mental ability too has never been doubted. You've seen the toughness that she's displayed, and when she's one of the best front runners, when she gets rolling, she steamrolls
She
ladies,
plays downhill for sure.
and she suffocates you, and if you're an opponent, it can really feel like the wheels are falling off the tracks quickly. And so it was nice to see her at the Rafa Nadal Academy. She has idolized Rafa Nadal to be able to go spend time on court with Rafa, with Francisco Roig, who was in the Rafa camp for so long, and just to feel that joy of tennis again. I think that's something we've seen has been lacking from her
Yeah.
more than anything else in her game. It's finding that joy, and I think that this is a huge step in the right direction to kind of rekindle that fun, because at the end of the day, tennis isn't it? It's you often start tennis because it's fun, and at some point it transitions to a business, and that can be a difficult transition. And people go through the ups and downs and the challenges at different moments of their career, but that ability to kind of rekindle and go back on what got you into the sport, I think is a important one.
Best timing too to instill confidence going back to the clay. So yeah, it's just about finding that joy again and getting back to who she is, and we'll see her in the winner circle again soon. Just quickly too, I do think, and I'm partial because I've gotten to know him, but I like the Rusedski and MPetshi Perricard pairing. I think that could be a good one for him to, someone that knows a thing or two about crushing some serves.
Yeah, look, you talk about how things you end up, you tie it back to what we were talking about earlier. You are where your feet are, right? And for MPetshi Perricard, he's got a great coach now, Greg Rusedski, and someone who's been at the top of the game and knows a thing or two about little serve and volley, and I think can add a lot of value to MPetshi Perricard. And so for him, it's putting any bad blood behind him, however he may have felt he was slighted and how the last coaching relationship ended. He's got a fantastic voice, and now it's time for him to move forward and see what he can do. Really, this clay court season, and also coming up on the grass in just a couple months' time.
Yeah, that's the special surface we all think it could be. Well, Bradley Klahn, before I let you go, another great chat, learning a lot, discussing the game with you as always. Monte Carlo, by all accounts, best scenes in tennis, just a scenic view in that Monaco glory. But some early results already. I love the 1 week Masters events. It's dying. There's only a few opportunities, so I savor this more than any. Qualifying is like a better, like a strong 250 when you look at the names in there. But we've already had some interesting results. We had Monfils win, beat Griekspoor in his last Monte Carlo. Stan lost to Baez. Rinderknecht beat Khachanov. Rublev wins, and Vachereau rallied. Vachereau, who we mentioned earlier, said he wants this tournament to be bigger than a slam for him, being a Monte Carlo guy. So that was an interesting line by someone who really wants it.
I can believe it. Being from Monte Carlo, I saw the reaction when Arniato won the doubles there. Was that last year, the year before? I think it was last year he won the doubles, and just the reaction. Look, you're so right. These 1 week Masters events are so fun. The matchups that you get in the first round, you're just looking through the draw, and you've got
Sinner plays Humbert in the first match. Sinner's first match is against Hugo Humbert.
Cerundolo, Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas has won in Monte Carlo before he's out in the first round. You just go up and down the draw. It's so fun when you get these guys, you get the top 50 players playing right from the get-go. And they're playing every day. You get to go to the tournament. You know you're going to see these stars in action on a day that you're going. And it's something that is missing with these 2 week events. And so it's challenging, but it's the first week of the clay. It always, I feel like, produces some interesting results, and just how guys are coming off the Sunshine Double, how much time they have to adjust. Are they ready, especially for the top guys who play deep into the event? So that's something I'll be looking at for Sinner, is how quickly he gets right on the clay, because he had such a long stretch winning both Indian Wells and Miami. For Carlos, he was out early. He's had a little bit more time to prepare. How does that affect him? But it's going to be, look, it's to me, it's the most picturesque setting on tour. You just see center court overlooking the water. You can't beat it.
Yeah, some great storylines, right? Musetti's back in the mix. Zverev's there and trying to be more aggressive to challenge the top players. And I'll leave with this, right? Will we finally see, we haven't seen it yet this year, Sinner Alcaraz. We're getting into April, and it's kind of crazy they haven't played each other yet.
Yeah. I wouldn't have said this would be the first one if it happens this late in the season, which is crazy because we're 3 months into the 3-4 months into the season. But it wouldn't surprise me. It's nice, it's nice to see Musetti back and hopefully healthy. Zverev, as you mentioned, playing more aggressive. He's someone who's had a lot of success on clay, but he's on Sinner's half of the draw. He's not been able to solve that riddle. Frankly, I think he matches up a little bit better against Alcaraz than Sinner. In just the matches, he's been far more competitive there. So I'm certainly excited. I'll be setting my alarm clock early to get up and check it out.
Yeah, maybe not for first ball on the West Coast here, but
no, the 2 a.m. doesn't quite sit. But we can get up and have our morning coffee at 5 a.m. Watch the tennis.
Sounds like a plan. Well, Bradley Klahn, all the best. Appreciate you. Was pumped to hear you on the T2 call, Tennis Channel 2 call for Houston. Looking forward to hearing you back on the airwaves. Always welcome on the show. Thanks again for joining the Inside in Tennis podcast.
Thanks so much, Mitch. Always a pleasure.
That was Bradley Klahn. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. Again, we're available on all your podcast platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeart, or Amazon Music. And the video episodes are available on the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals. So make sure you subscribe to both. Leave a nice rating on the podcast platform of your choice. We're back in a few days, more episodes all through clay season as we gear up for this outstanding road to Roland Garros, starting with the Monte Carlo Masters. For Bradley Klahn, I'm Mitch Michals. Thank you for listening to the Inside in Tennis podcast. I'll talk to you soon.